Did you change your reading habits when you started approaching writing specifically, or were you, I'm sorry, your reading habits, or were you always just a big reader consistently?
I was always a big reader consistently. And as I think I said, like I would, even when I was quite young, I'd be like, well, this part's not realistic and they should have set it up there. So I was doing that without realizing like I didn't even think about that as relating to writing in any way. I just thought like, this book would obviously be better if they had done it this way. Like, why didn't, but I do remember going to an SCBWI conference and hearing like, well, you have to read what's up to date in your own, age category and genre, but you should be reading in the other age categories and genres. Oh, and you should be maybe reading adult, and I'd been totally overwhelmed because I think I thought I had to read that all in like 2 weeks. And again, one good thing about it being kind of a long haul is that I do read a lot, but what's changed a little bit is I found, and I wonder if this is because I'm sort of trying to be selfish for my own writing crafty ends, is I go through phases. So I go through a middle grade phase where I might be reading 4 middle grade novels a week. Like that's like every free moment I get, I'm just reading. But then, I might go through an adult phase, where I'm reading a lot of adult, like I tend to and then I'll go through a YA phase. Picture books I can sprinkle around because they're nice and short, but I do go sort of through phases of reading one chunk and then another chunk. And also while I'm reading, I will sometimes very consciously look for mentor texts. So like if I hear a book that might have some similarity to my book, even if it might be a different genre and a different category, but maybe they use chapters in a certain way, or maybe the passage of time is similar or something, I will seek out those books so I can try to find some mentor text to kind of help me with whatever I'm working on at the time.
So if you're working on like a science fiction story, you might pick up Ursula Le Guin, you might pick up Hugh Howey, a couple of great sci-fi writers to kind of help you hone in, or?
Yeah, exactly. But I might even be like, oh, let's say I'm working on a science fiction story, but I also know that it's science fiction, but not actually in the future, but in an alternate universe, that maybe it's in the past, or maybe there's X kind of technology, or, like there's something specific. I might try to read a book. Again, the specific technology might be different, but like, how do they do that? Or if there's a book that I know has a big flash, like kind of alternates between, let's say it alternates between our world and a science fiction world, that kind of goes back and forth. I might look for that. It might be almost more structurally looking for similarities in some ways. Definitely also like looking at the greats and the classics. But then sometimes this will be like between, say, draft 3 and 4, where I'm just not quite getting it. I'll be like, what would I want this to be like? And it's funny because the books I'll often pick might be very different. It's almost like, just for me, it might be very different in terms of tone or age category or whatever, but maybe I'll notice like, oh, they go 80 pages. I'm thinking of a specific book. They go 80 pages with this one narrator, and then they switch narrators somewhat unexpectedly and go 40 pages with that. And then, so maybe if I've got, 2 points of view, I don't need to actually switch off every chapter. Maybe I can go for larger chunks here and larger chunks there. And how would that effect be? Would I be doing something similar? I'd say more at the start of a project, I'll do the like, oh, it's science fiction, so I'm going to read the greats. And then more in the middle of a project, I might be like, I'm just not nailing this the way I want to be. Let me look at, where do I see the flaws in my own work, and what are some authors that seem to have, managed that much better than I am doing at the moment. And I'll kind of go that way. So both. You know what I've also found? I don't know if you've found this. I mean, maybe because you're doing the podcast and you see other authors or real people. I feel like I'm a much more generous reader. Like, I think when I wasn't writing, I'd be like they should have done this. And now I approach it like, good job. It's so hard to do this well. Yeah, sure. Yeah, they could have dropped a hint. Like before, so why did they drop a hint in chapter 3? But maybe that would have ruined the pacing a little bit. I don't know. They're doing great. Like, I am much more forgiving because maybe I want people to have that same forgiveness with my work if I don't quite nail it the way they want. No, you just realize it's really hard to do well, and there's so many competing things in any given book. So
A little bit of both. When I was reviewing books at the blog, my policy was always I only review the positive aspects and never the negative ones, which is no kind of book review at all. But that's okay. Because I was still learning the best parts of the books and saying the nicest things and looking at them with the most favorable eyes that I possibly could. And I do find that that's useful, because looking overly negative at everything, I did that in college. At one point, I was trying to what's his name, the author of East of Eden and John Steinbeck. I was trying to write a piece that if John Steinbeck were to read it up in heaven or wherever, he would know where he messed up his novel. I'm like, going a little hard on John Steinbeck. He did plenty of great things. He doesn't need this kind of criticism. But it does annoy me a little bit when I'll read something that's just so glaringly obvious that should have been fixed. And I think of all the people I know, and you said that the best YA novel you've ever written isn't published. There's only a select few spots. And when you see some joker took one of those spots and didn't do the homework, didn't master their craft ahead of time, there is a little bit of annoyance, not just for me, but for all the other authors I know that could have had that spot that came with their game face on. They knew what they were up to, and this author just got lucky, or who knows what happened.
Yeah.
So long rambling way of saying I see both sides.
Well, and I think I pick, like, maybe one reason I also kind of like more what I'm reading is because I am sort of so consciously picking it, like, it might be an author I have a couple degrees of separation with, or I've picked this book because I've heard it's good at the specific things I'm doing. So I'm better at curating what I'm reading so that I'm getting, my bookshelf. I feel like there's a lot of excellent books there, but I'm sort of on Twitter or whatever, I'm getting, I feel like, just first class book recommendations. So, and you know what else? I actually, to your point, maybe I used to always finish a book no matter what. And I've actually started not finishing, like, for the first time in my life. Maybe it was the pandemic and I was just like, I started occasionally not finishing books. So maybe I'm also not getting annoyed, because if I'm reading the book, I must like it because I'm sticking with it. Whereas for my whole life, I would be sitting next to my husband on a plane, like, I hate this book, and he'd be like, you can put it down. I'm like, no, I can't. But and then I'd be like 2 pages later, I'm like, oh my God. He'd be like, really, you can stop? I'm like, I cannot stop. But now I'm like, life's too short. My to be read list is way too long. Next,
Maybe it's leftover. Maybe this is me projecting, but it's leftover from the old book it days, where if you read so many books, you'd get a free pizza. And if you didn't read that book, you don't deserve pizza.
I did do the reading Olympics in grade school, where you had to finish each book to qualify for any level of medal. So maybe that is it.
But I'm a firm believer that there's different definitions of the word reading. When you have to get something read. And if it's a book that you're not enjoying, but you feel that you should know because it's big in your genre, I'm fine with skimming, reading, getting the general gist of it and putting it down. If you're not having a great time, life's too short to read the book that gets you passionate, that energizes you, that you're really enjoying. But some reads, like a good James Patterson novel, that's not meant to, you're not supposed to sit down with a highlighter and this is the most brilliant writing I've ever seen. You're not going to find it there. That's not what a James Patterson novel is there for. That's to get you through the ride on the airplane. And if you read it in that style, it's perfect for that.
Yeah, no, and that's true. And that's true. The specific book I was mentioning on the airplane was significantly worse than that, and rather offensive too. So I do want, but yes.
Offensive is a whole other thing.
Yeah, no, it was a whole other thing. But yeah, definitely. And I think that's the other thing. I hope I always felt this way, but I realize even more as a writer is that there is a place for all kinds of work. Even for myself personally, there are times when I'm like, I just can't read that, times when I'm dying to read a book, like there's a place for so many different kinds of books. And we're lucky to have as many as we do, and hopefully that will broaden even more.
Even when I don't like a book, like I do not like Twilight. I've said this before. It's not my read, but I did read it, and I did appreciate what went into it and why it worked as well as it worked. And when a book is that big and a lot of people do love it, I feel it's my responsibility, even if I don't love it, to understand why it's beloved.
Yeah, and I do think that was one thing I learned at an early SCBWI conference. Someone said something like every book is published for a reason, and you don't have to like every book, but if you can figure out what that reason is, it will help you as a writer. Just to know, even if it's to know like, oh, I understand what that is, and that's not what I'm trying to do. Like, that's okay too, but just understanding, what's out there and why it's out there can be really helpful. But there are so many great books too. I mean, I feel like I read a lot, and I feel like I barely, there's still so many books I've been meaning to read or haven't quite gotten around to. So,
well, and every once in a while, and I talk like all I'm reading is bad books. That's not true. I'm endlessly delighted by the number of wonderful books that I'm coming across, and surprised by, I thought this would be good, but that's so much better than I ever thought it would be. And that happens frequently as well. But once in a while, there's a book that just really gets you reinvigorated about reading, and I'll read 5 more books looking for another version of the experience I just had with this tremendous novel.
Yeah, no, that's the best. That's the best. And there books like that can also get you invigorated to write. Like, my agent, who is just absolutely wonderful on every front, but she recommended a book she liked when we were talking about a project, and just reading that, even if I can't write this well, it gives me something to aspire to. Like, I love this book. It was so, from the first page, in fact, it was Spinning Silver, which is right here. But from the first page, I was just like so captivated. But it was also really fun. And I was like, oh yeah, this is why I want to write. I want to create stuff, not this in the literal, but like stuff like that. Like, this is fun. It's smart. There's so much there. Like, and it's so exciting as a writer too, to be like, oh yeah, that's what, this gives me something to aspire to in a really fun way, not it's always daunting because it's writing and it's all, as you said, just a lot, but it's really fun. It should be hopefully fun too, most of the time at least.
Well, it can be daunting, but it can also be just a real nice reality check. Like, hey, if you want your book to be on the shelf next to these books, this is where you need to raise your game to.
Exactly. But sometimes raising your game can be fun. Like, oh yeah, humor, and oh yeah, like interesting twists. Like, for me, I'm definitely someone who loves revision way more than the initial drafting. And so I think maybe also that's another reason why I kind of enjoy it. Like, oh yeah, there's all this fun stuff to raise your game. Whereas for me, the initial drafting is just tough going. So maybe when I'm reading and making a connection with my work, if it's at a point where I'm making a connection, I'm closer to the revision phase. Or do you prefer revision or drafting, or are you?
I love the freedom of drafting, but I start to feel like there's a little bit of despair that comes with drafting because I don't know for sure where it's going to be. Whereas by the time you get to revision, like, I know how this ends. I'm confident it will eventually be great, and I can start to see it really forming into itself. So revision is definitely more comfortable. And it's always like, well, the first thing I want to do when I start a new project is go back and read the old one. No, I like that. We just fixed it. Everything's finished. I don't want to be at this place of everything is uncertain and up in the air a little bit at the start again.